dropping the front cross member, you've got to remove the under tray from the front. It's held in by a number of fasteners all the way around and across here as well. This is a later vehicle, the earlier ones I know are different. I've had to drill off one or two of these fasteners because they were all corroded. So these clips all need replacing, and so do the screws. So you just take 4 bolts out on each corner. They came out really easily. This obviously needs a bit of a tidy up. But this sits underneath the cross member, so it needs to be out the way in order for you to drop it. So to support the engine, you need an engine support beam. It sits on the inner wing. Now it's a bit crowded down there, but I haven't got any lifting eyes, so I've put 2 bolts in here, one each side, and put the chain underneath the bolts. And in order to take the weight of the engine, I tightened this down until the chains went taut on the one side, and then I tightened it on the other side and made sure that these then went loose. So I knew that the engine had moved up slightly. It perhaps only went up 1/4 of an inch, and then just took the weight on the other one just to equal it out. It really wasn't very hard to fit. Now, removing the subframe, it was a little bit awkward. I did it a bit differently to the way that the manual suggests. The manual suggests we should disconnect the pipes on this side, but as you can see, these really move around quite easily. The same on the other side. And also it says you need to remove the steering rack, but I found just by disconnecting the steering rack I could then support it in place with some axle stands, and then the front cross member comes away. It's only held in place really by a few things. On my car I've got HID headlights, so this is the sensor for it. So you have to make sure that you remove the plug for that. We've got the forward mounting, and just here the rear mounting, and then we've got the engine mounting there as well. So that's the same on both sides. Now you can lower this with all the suspension in place. You've got the upper suspension fitting just here, and then down underneath you've got the 2 lower arm attachment points, and obviously the anti-roll bar. So while this is out, I'm going to change the forward bush. I'm going to change the V-mount, which is still stuck up in here, and I'm going to change the engine mountings as well. But the way that I did it, the front engine mounts came out really easily. The back ones on the driver's side, the right hand side in the UK, the bolt came out the centre just here really easily. But actually on this side it was obscured by this casting here. So I took out the fasteners for the V-mount to here and lowered it away, and that was easier. So I'll do the reverse procedure when I assemble it. I think I'll put the bolt majority of the way in, perhaps just leave it just with maybe 1/4 of a turn or so to go, so there's a little bit of movement and play. But in essence it wasn't too hard to do. I was quite surprised. It's awkward to do but not hard to do. In this location where the cross member bolts on, there's also this bracket here, so it's just held on by the 2 bolts at the front, and then there's a bolt that goes up through there, which then comes through this and into the frame up there. So you have to take off 1, 2, 3, take out the bolt for the V-mount, and take the bolt out for the engine mount. So what I did, I moved this motorcycle stand all the way up until it touched the bottom of the cross member, and took the bolts out and then lowered it down a little bit. I found these pipes at the front, there's enough flex on the hoses that you can just move them out of the way. There's no need to disconnect anything here either. A couple of clips, one either side, needs taking off, which actually bolts to just there on this bracket. The hardest part of removing this actually was my V-mounts had corroded massively. So to get a pry bar in, it was around about this area here, and pry it down. You can just see the marks of where I've done it there, and it freed off both sides. The actual subframe itself isn't heavy. One person can lift it. It's an easier job with two people, one on either side. So there's about a 1/4 inch gap between the subframe and the platform now. Let's see if we can release it. There we go. Has it released your side?
Yeah.
Not quite free on it. And now so I'm going to get this slid out from underneath the car, give it a good clean up, change the anti-roll bar bushes, and make it all look good. I need to take this V-mount off here and attend to the rust before it goes back. I'll take a look at the cross member itself. This is the location of the bracket underneath. It goes through, the bolt comes through the hole there. I've changed that bush. I've also put a new V-mount on. That is where the engine mount goes. So it's just really these three fasteners. But you can see the state of the V-mount that I took off. Both sides were equally as bad as one another. The forward ones weren't so bad. But the forward bushings as well had gone. So these just pushed out and pushed in a similar way to a suspension bush. This is the position of the anti-roll bar. Those bushes were poor as well. So fitting the anti-roll bar bushes, got some poly bushes here. So they sit in like that with the split to the rear. And the size of these is just 10mm. I torque these down to between 22 and 28 Newton meters.
you.